to a Hope 1032 podcast.
Hello and welcome back to Season 7 of Raising Teens. I'm Collett Smart and I'm a psychologist, a teacher, and your host on Raising Teens. I'm also a parent and I'm in the middle of raising my own teens and young adult children. I know that raising teens can be fun and crazy and exciting, but also terrifying and even lonely. I've experienced all of these emotions, sometimes in the same day. On this podcast, I'm joined by well-known experts, and we will chat about some of the most common questions that I get asked about raising teenagers in my own work, and even some questions I have myself. I've loved seeing all your questions come in, so this season I'm going to focus on some that teachers, parents, and carers have raised. We're all caring for the teens we love so much, so please send in your ideas and your questions through my Instagram and Facebook page or via the Hope Podcast webpage so we can support this generation of teens together. Lyn Worsley is a clinical psychologist and a registered nurse. She's the director of the Resilience Centre in Sydney, Australia, which has a reputation for innovative solution-focused approaches to client change through individual and group therapies for over 25 years. At the Resilience Centre, Lyn supervises specialist psychologists and coordinates community seminars, training workshops, and resilience groups for people of all ages. Lyn is also the author of The Resilience Doughnut, a pioneering model showing the strong context where resilience is enhanced both during development and through adulthood. The Resilience Doughnut has now become a foundational ecological model of resilience which is recognized internationally. To date, the Resilience Doughnut has been used by schools, businesses, corporate and community organizations to build personal resilience, helping people to flourish and thrive. As I'm sure you've guessed, in this episode, we're talking about resilience. I once heard Andrew Fuller, a friend of the podcast, describe resilience as the happy knack of being able to bungee jump through the pitfalls of life. Hello, Lyn, and welcome to Raising Teens.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Collett. It's just wonderful.
Lyn, I'm so excited to have you on this episode because you were the very first person I ever did any sort of formal training around resilience. I did your Resilience Doughnut training program. I ran the Resilience Doughnut with teenagers and even primary school children. I even got to present the Resilience Doughnut to parents at schools after I'd been trained by you. And so, I'd love you to just talk a little bit about this program. You're the first person I ever think of when I hear the word resilience or resilience training, and that's why you had to be the first person on this podcast that I got to speak on resilience. So what is resilience? What does it look like for our parents and our listeners?
Well, first of all, it just looks like having your heart singing like mine is right now, just hearing that you've actually done the training and then gone off and trained others and still think of the model in that way. So thank you. That just reminds me that it's worthwhile. But when I think about what is resilience, resilience is not a noun or a descriptive word. It is a verb. It's a doing word. So resilience is a process and an interaction of three very dynamic movements in the development of the person. So one is you're developing your social and your personal competence. At the same time that you're doing that with the ability to navigate and negotiate with your resources, which is another way of saying navigating and negotiating with people that are there in your world, at the same time as going through adversity. So it's three things: developing competence, navigating resources, and going through adversity. And I love that aspect of the resilience because it just makes you go, hang on a minute, I'm going through something really tough. I'm not measuring whether I'm doing it well or not, but I'm actually going to look at how can I get some help in the right direction and how am I growing through this? Because to be honest, It's not so much what we're going through that matters, it's who we are in the process of that and how we're changing.
I'm so glad you mentioned being resilient even while you're going through adversity. I actually said at a parent seminar last week to parents, your child can actually still be anxious and resilient at the same time. Just because a child is struggling with anxiety or struggling with certain things in their lives doesn't mean there's an absence of resilience or that they can't learn how to be more resilient. So I know it's backed by research. It's not just a buzzword. Tell us a little bit about the research behind resilience. Let's dig a little bit into that research.
The research has been going on for a long time. I first came onto the research bandwagon in about 2008. And at that point, there'd been a turning point from looking for a trait or a resilience gene or a resilience set of criteria of what looks like resilience. And then it moved to actually, let's look at how the interaction of very different ways of getting towards resilience has occurred. So a lot of the research is basically now a culmination of what's worked over the years. So what do resilient people look like? And what does resilience look like in its development? And so when we start thinking about the process of resilience, we need to then start looking at the research that measures those three processes, the three interactive processes, the development of competence, how you navigate with your social ecologies, they call it in the research literature. So essentially, it's just like who's on your team and the people that are in your world, and also what's establishing adversity. How do we take advantage of adversity? And so a lot of the research now is going, well, we need to see adversity as an opportunity for growth rather than a protection for growth. So the resilience research is really, if you think about a bell curve, and we all sort of know a bit about a bell curve, and we did parabolas at school. When you look at a bell curve, the resilience research looks at those who have gone through significant adversity, yet have survived and thrived and even flourished in the context of that adversity. And so it then says, well, what is it that's different about those people than those who are in the general population? So it's looking at the squeaky end at the top. And I love that. I love that so much because I can copy them. I can do what they do. I can start thinking, there's a little bit of a formula and I'm going to do what is in that formula, and maybe I will cope with the tough stuff a little bit better as I get older.
So let's start a little bit then with the flip side of what would a teen look like who is not resilient? So if a parent is listening to this and saying, okay, I'm listening to those three factors, but I'm not quite sure, am I looking at my teen who's just going through everyday teen stuff, or what does a child or a teen look like who is struggling with resilience?
It's a really hard question for me to ask because I spend my whole time at the top end of that bell curve thinking about what that looks like for those who are doing well. So I'm going to tell you about them first, and then I will go back into the other end. So what we're looking at is those teens who are in the process of resilience. They are anxious. They are doing stuff that makes them not want to go to school. They are doing things that make them fall apart. And they are expressing some signs of, mental distress. However, what it looks like for those kids who seem to survive and thrive is that they're surrounded by people, and this is a circle around the donut, and I will explain that a little bit later. It's that they have people who lean in but don't rescue them. They have people who lean in and go, so how are you getting through this? Like, this is tough. And have you thought of, or maybe we can do this together, or people who lean in and work with the child to enable them to develop the skills so that next time they go into that dark place, they have more skills. So it doesn't mean that we're looking for people who are going through dark stuff and saying that they're not resilient. It's actually we're looking for the people around them to see if those people around them are equipped to give them the skills. So then look at the other end of the curve of those people who don't seem like they have resilience, I look at it very differently. I see a child who might be isolated, who might look really tough now, who might seem like they're bouncing through and they're feisty and so on, but they pull away from others and they don't have connections of people stepping forward. They might have people around them like uncles and aunties and cousins and teachers who just go, oh, too hard, and they won't put their hand up to link in with them. So I'm always looking for the significant others to establish the resilience of that person, not necessarily their outcomes or how they're presenting.
I think it's important to stress here that resilience is not about developing a thick skin or gritting your teeth and stuffing down your emotions. Resilience is also not simply having an easy time in life. Being resilient doesn't mean there is an absence of mental health issues in our teens. I want you to hear me clearly here. Your teen can be both anxious and resilient. Some of the most resilient teens I know are those who have mental health conditions. For example, they might struggle with, say, social anxiety or loss or feeling anxious about an exam or a violin performance. And then they use their strengths and the healthy resources or the strategies they've learned. They live out that saying, feel the fear and do it anyway. So getting back to what does someone who is not resilient look like? Well, someone who is not resilient is more likely to feel overwhelmed and then they dwell on their problems. It can also show up in physical signs like sleep issues or irritability, but people who lack resilience often turn to unhealthy coping strategies like isolation, constantly avoiding challenges, engaging in risky behaviors, or perhaps self-medicating with alcohol or drugs, for example. And that's, to me, I think what I love about the Resilience Doughnut is it's very much about relationship, all those relationships around the child or the young person. And the more you talk about it, the more we can hear resilience isn't just about that child, or it's not something intrinsic within that child. It's actually, when we look at building resilience, it's actually looking at encouraging and building the support structures around the child to help that child develop resilience in a sense. So it's this, they all overlap. And I find that fascinating because so often I think, you know, in the past when we used to think about resilience, we used to think of just the child and say we have to fix you or do something just for you. But it's actually the whole system that we're focusing on.
That's correct. And that means we are, as adults, responsible not for rescuing, never rescue a child, never protect a child, prepare a child.
Expand on that. I'm glad you re-said that rescuing. I was going to ask you about that. Expand on what does not rescuing a child look like and not protecting a child look like, because that seems to go against everything we want to do as a parent. And that's one of the hardest parts of being a parent. We sometimes want to rescue and fix and then we think we save our children. And I often say to parents that often makes our children weaker when we bubble wrapping and fixing and protecting and rescuing. What does that look like in practical ways, Lyn, to not rescue?
To not rescue may be not taking that call when they're at a camp and they want to come home, and making sure that they have got the relationships with the teachers and the people and the friends at the camp to actually help them to get through, rather than being the first point of call to ring the teacher, you know, to be the go-between. So what you want is that you want the child to learn to navigate and navigate the right teacher to talk to, negotiate about what they need for help. It doesn't mean changing the environment to make themselves feel better. So it really does mean preparing them to navigate and negotiate in the world through the tough stuff and find the right person to get help. So when you're protecting a child, you don't let them experience failure, or you don't let them experience anxiety. You see anxiety and depression as a condition that needs to be treated rather than a symptom that is a result of difficulties and circumstances that they're going through. So in some times, particularly during adolescence, depression and anxiety, as much as it gives us fear in a child, and it gives us as parents a fear, it is also an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for self-reflection, and an opportunity for having conversations and reaching out. So what we need to be doing is reaching out with them in ways that enables them to still have the agency in their own lives. Protecting takes that away. Rescuing takes the agency away. Preparing sits beside them and asks, how did you manage that? You wanted to come home from camp. It was really tough and you couldn't get onto me. I am really sorry about that. But how'd you get through? Who did you call for help? Oh, wow, what a great friend. That is an awesome friend. How did you know to go to that friend? What is it about them that you've learned? And what did you learn about yourself in the process? Now, I know I've had adolescents. I've treated a lot of adolescents. They're not going to say, oh, thank you, Mum, and that's a really nice, and, you're such a lovely mum, and I'm going to tell you all about these things. They're basically going to go sullen. They're not going to talk to you for a while. They'll be angry at you for a while. But that's also a really good sign that they've got the feistiness in them to be able to manage next time. So it's also about, as a parent, not wanting to be liked and ready to be hated at times, knowing full well that you're taking them through something that's going to give them the skills for later on.
And it's drawing on the strength they already have, the things that they thought of doing, no matter how tiny they might or insignificant they might think it is. It's suddenly we're noticing those, and it helps them notice their strengths. Lyn, if there's a parent listening, what do they do if they say, my child just refuses to notice any strengths or even give me options for what they could do or what they could try? They kind of just shut down. What do you do with a teenager like that?
You find somebody else they can talk to. And it might be, hopefully, not just a psychologist or someone you take them to pay. My hope is that, through the work that I have done over these years, is that people start to see that as parents, there are 6 other factors that actually help raise a child, and to engage those. And so the best thing you can do as a parent is get to know their friends' parents, get to know other people in the community, get to know their coaches, get to know their teachers, and then just go, how about you go and talk to them about this? Or, activate the favorite uncle. How about you take them out fishing next week? I'm really worried about them. They're not talking to me, and I thought that might be useful. And activating situations where there's deeper connections, and sometimes taking a back seat as a parent, because, as parents, we're a little bit too caring at times, and it doesn't develop the skills. I know for me as a parent, I want to wrap my arms around my kids, and I don't want them to be hurt. I don't want them to suffer. But you know what? They're going to suffer. Everyone is going to suffer. Everyone is going to get hurt. They're all going to have disappointments. They're all going to grieve. They're all going to lose somebody at some point in their life. And it's going to be tough. They're all going to fail too. So we need to prepare them for all of those so that they can start seeing that there is worth in other areas of their life, and that other people believe in them, and they can reach out to the right people.
Sometimes we hear people saying, we're trying to help these young people become resilient. They're such a snowflake generation. Are young people more, less similar in resilience to past generations? What would your answer be to someone who said that?
I don't think they're any different, but there are some different things that they're having to deal with in their environment than past generations have done. In the past, I worked as a youth worker, and that's a long time ago now, but I still find it very relevant. And at the time, I predicted a number of youth that I thought would not do very well in their adult years. And I was completely wrong. And that's where my sparked interest on, well, what is it that makes resilience? And there were some that I just thought would be just fine and absolutely had everything going for them. Beautiful homes, lovely set up at, in the way that they were set up at school, high intelligence, etc. And they didn't do so well. And so what struck me is that person who is developing those factors of, I guess, being able to be adaptable to change, a person who is able to cope with loss, has often experienced some difficulties in the past. And young people who've gone through some tough stuff in the past often develop a sense of, I guess, their place in the world rather than thinking that they're the top of the tree. They work out that, I'm not the only one here, and I've had to learn some compassion and look out away from myself and feel for other people. And so what I think about in the past is different, is that, there was always things that people had to be dealing with. But at the moment we have a buzzword that I think Tom Hanks put it out there and said that we have an era with the modern hypersensitivities. And we're at the moment pandering to the modern hypersensitivities because somehow we're frightened that if we don't pander to them, we'll get blamed and we'll be in trouble for hurting them. But all that means is that a child is being pandered to this modern hypersensitivities. They're having to make the world adapt to them rather than them having to navigate and negotiate with the world. And I know that there is a place for us to understand neurodiversity. Absolutely. I'm a psychologist. I'm very aware of that. But what we need to be doing is not pushing it under the carpet and pretending it's not there and just getting them get on with it, which was old school thinking. But we've gone the other way to make everyone pander to that child, which doesn't help them to adapt to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when they leave our care, I often say to parents, the big world out there doesn't love them the way you do, and it can be a lot more cruel. And if they haven't developed the skills when they're young, they're then out there on their own and they don't have anything to draw on. And so it's while we love them, I always talk about allowing our children to experience soft landings, because you are there, just like you spoke about, Lyn, saying, how did you do that? Wow, tell me a little bit more about what you did to get to that place. Who did you talk to? Those are things we can do while they're young. It's more difficult when they're an adult and they haven't drawn on those skills. It's not impossible. We both know that, but that's why we're trying to build resilience in our young people. Let's get into your resilience donut now. You've spoken a little bit about why you developed it, but give us a bigger picture of that and what it measures. Tell us all about this donut. I have this memory of you saying it became the donut because you were drawing these circles on paper on your kitchen bench.
That's right. And my kids came in and said, what's this donut everywhere? And I went, oh, it's the resilience donut. And then it stuck. And, it does make it very light and playful. But it is actually an incredibly simple model with a lot of complexities in using it. So the simplicity of it is that this is, if you can imagine the shape of a donut, you've got an inside circle and an outside circle. And the inside circle has, I guess it refers to what we have inside us. That I have, I am, and I can. I have people that help me, and I am a nice person, and I can do things to change my circumstances. And we carry those phrases or that way of thinking in our minds probably our whole life. As a child, however, we start to develop those from the interaction with the outside part of the donut. And the outside part of the donut, the fleshy part, the bit you eat, if you divide that up into 7 parts and put different coloured icing on it, then you have all the factors of interactions and relationships that build that inside circle. So it's a complete interaction. But each of those factors have within them a level of tension. And in those tensions, there are adversities in there, but there's also tensions that make those factors stronger. So, for example, I'll go through one by one. The factors are the parent factor. And the tension around the parent factor is that the parent doesn't give in to the child all the time and exhibits a level of control that keeps the child to be accountable for things. But it's also that parent that's able to go, no, you're not giving up, but I love you and I think you're the best in the world. Rather than I love you so much, but I'll take it off you, darling, and it doesn't matter. You don't have to do anything. That's not helpful. And it's not helpful for the parent to be overly organized and not show any affection. So it's this 50-50 mix, which I think is a really nice little ballpark.
Let me just interrupt you for a minute. I remember a story, I think at the training you told about your own son when he came in one night and said, oh, I've got this massive assessment to do and now I've got to do an all-nighter. And you didn't write to the teacher and ask for an extension. You went and got a big block of chocolate that you had stashed somewhere in a drawer and you gave it to him for the night and you said, I'm with you in this. Here you go. Here, have this for some energy for the night. That just stuck with me. I actually had to do something similar with one of my own children fairly recently who was kind of trying to get me to do all the work. And I was, no, I believe in you. Here's a hot chocolate. And off I went and, came back and they'd actually managed. And it's, we want to rescue, but, you didn't rescue your son. And that just sticks with me every time I've wanted to rescue my own children.
Yes. And he does remind me of that story quite often. And at the time, I think I wanted him to fail because I just thought, you have done all-nighters or you've left things to the last minute all this time. I just want you to fail once and then you might learn it. But he did really well after his all-nighter. So that was very important.
So the chocolate helped.
The chocolate and the coffee.
Yeah. Okay, next factor.
And the next factor is the skill factor. And that's where you go, yes, I can do this. And it may not be that you're very good at something, but you try. For example, I go surfing. I am not a great surfer, but I'm better than my husband, so that's okay.
That's good.
And I love to surf with my kids and I love to surf with my community. But when I'm surfing, I will try. And sometimes it takes me 2 weeks to get the energy up to actually catch the waves that I need to catch. Now, that's not about me being the best at it. It's about me being able to go, yes, I did it. And I kept trying. And for children, it is about having those things where they just push it a little bit further, and they finally get it and they master it. And when I come back to that, I often think about the story of one of my colleagues who said to her son, now you've heard Lyn's resilience donut, and when you think about the donut, think about whether if you were really hopeless at maths, but really, really good at tennis, which one do you think you should get some coaching in? And he said, tennis. Because essentially that's what would build resilience, the mastery in something that you're really, really good at. And so that's what we're talking about here in the skill factor. And in that you get your coach, you get a mentor, you get people who actually believe in you for that particular skill. The next one you look at is the family factor. And in the family factor, you might have aunties, uncles, grandparents, siblings, cousins, and the sense of the child within a nested family. And the family is often enmeshed with culture as well, which is lovely. And in that process, there's a sense of belonging. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the perfect family, because I don't know if I've ever met a perfect family. It's more to do with having a family where there is that conflict and that tension, and you have to tiptoe around people sometimes, and you have to support them at times, and you learn skills in that process. But they have your back when something goes wrong. The next factor is the education factor. And in the education factor, you have, in the research, it tells us that a child has a teacher or someone in the school that believes in them. And oftentimes it could even just be the teacher at the front office, because they're outside the principal's office a lot. And it may be that they have a relationship there of someone who goes, hey, what are you in trouble for now? It's, I've got your back. Come and talk to me afterwards. And it's that like, oh, someone believes in me and I've got someone who I like or who likes me. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're good at school.
I love that, especially about the resilience donut, is the education factor isn't necessarily, I'm, the ducks of school. It's the people in there. And so it goes back to relationship.
It does. It's that navigating and negotiating. And I often see kids who have been the ducks of school, who've got, the scholarships, and they come back to see me later with this sense of like, I don't know what to do. I haven't got these skills to relate to people like my friend who failed all the way through, but I just ride on his coattails all the time because he's so good with people. Now, there's the difference in life in general. The next factor is the peer factor. And in the peer factor, it's like having friends that you fight with, argue with, can't get your own way. You have to accommodate them. You have to fit in with them. They tell you not to do things, or they pick on you when there's things going wrong. So you learn how to conform. And that helps you to navigate and negotiate with people later on. The next factor is the community factor. And in the community factor, we have a sense of being involved in a community. That might be our church group. It might be a club, a football club. It might be scouts or cubs or guides or any of those sorts of things. But a community may also be something that your family fit in, and it resembles a culture. And in a community factor, we have a age group that might be people younger than us and people who are older than us. And in that community factor, you get a sense of your continuity. You see people ahead of you, and you can see how people are going ahead of you, so you can make decisions about your future. The next factor is the money factor. And in the money factor, it's not about being wealthy, but it's also not about being poor. So if we think about the bell curve again, it's really about battling with money. So this is parents' permission to say, I'm working on your resilience, so I'm not going to give you any money for that. I'm going to help you to work out the value of money. So you have to go and earn that money for yourself before you spend it. I'm not going to just give you money so you learn how to control it, because essentially the money factor tells us that money is earned and then spent, not just given.
So this is where things like chores might fit in. For some families, certain chores are not paid because it's part of you living in the home and you contributing to the home. But then there might be certain chores in the house that you might use as part of pocket money so that a child can learn how to navigate money, and then encouraging your older teens to start getting part-time jobs and so on so they can learn that. I love this aspect of the resilience donut because it is about looking outside of yourself and learning responsibilities.
This is correct. And so it's essentially about currency.
Yeah.
So it may actually be that you go and bring in the next door neighbour's garbage bin. You're not going to get paid for that, but there's currency in that. You're giving. It's about giving and taking.
Yeah. Lyn, so much of what we've heard, again, the majority of the factors are people-based factors, and this speaks to the research for me, that research that so often for a young person to develop resilience, they just need one significant adult in their life. And I know when I spoke to Davida, who's also part of the Resilience Centre, he was talking about that. So I'd love you to just expand a little bit on that, because you touched on it earlier. Sometimes if our children won't or don't want to talk with us for a period of time, we worry that, something's going to go wrong because they should need us all of the time, and they don't always need us. Or there might be times when we might be going through pain, or there might be family separation, and our children choose not to talk to us because they don't want to hurt us. And that one significant adult is such an important part of a child's life. And I can see where that one significant adult could come out of the parent factor, but the family factor, the community factor. There's so many aspects or so many factors there where the child could access one significant adult.
Our research has actually revealed a little bit different to that past research. The past research did say, it's one significant adult that makes a difference. But you actually look back on that research again, and there's not just one significant adult that actually comes through. It may be an adult that's outside of the family and an adult that's outside of the parents that makes a difference. But I tend to think about things in threes, because our research shows that when we use the resilience donut as a model for intervention for somebody who's moving towards resilience, we want to head them in that direction, then what we do is that we start to look at how many factors they've got present, the more mentally stable they are. Okay, so what we have found is that if they have one significant adult, they do okay. If they have two, they do pretty well. If they have three, they do markedly well.
Okay.
So there's a big jump. And so what that means is that what we need to be looking for is joining up three factors in the resilience donut, and only three. You only need three in order to push us into that I have people to help me cope, I am a nice person, and I can do things to change my circumstances. So the way I think about it as a parent myself is that I really, really want my kids to not need me. I want them to come and visit me one day, but I really don't want them to need me. What I would like is that they can go and have other options. If they don't want to talk to me and they're angry at me because I'm providing a little bit of conflict for them, then they need to have somebody else they can go to, but they need to have choices. Because if that one significant adult isn't available, then that's a lot on their shoulders. But it also, I would like to have them hear the voices of other people in their head who are significant to them. It might be a grandparent. It might be a teacher. It might be a youth worker. It might be the coach of their soccer team.
These kinds of relationships and some of these factors tie into the idea of sparks and finding spark champions, which I wrote about in my first book. The concept of sparks is closely linked to the skill factor in the resilience donut, and sparks were investigated by the late Peter Benson at the Search Institute. Sparks are those interests and passions that young people have that light a fire in their lives and express the essence of who they are and what they offer to the world. Benson found a long list of sparks identified by young people. They include music, the arts, science, a passion for the environment, caring for others, animals, the list goes on. He said that most teens are able to tell you what their spark is. It's just that they are often not asked. Benson's work on Spark Champions also ties in with the Resilience Donut's parent, family and identity, and community factors. There are really three adults in a teen's life who will talk to them and ask questions about their spark. It could be a grandparent, an age group coach, this year's teacher, a youth leader, or a family friend. In my own son's life, his spark is basketball. So his Spark Champions will ask him how his last training went. They might watch his games. They might just comment on his latest basketball shoes or watch some of the NBA games with him. You can find a link to the Search Institute and Benson's TEDx talk, Sparks, How You Thrive, in the show notes.
I'd like to be able to foster those relationships. And so if I was parenting again, I would spend time with each of the factors around their donut. I would spend time sending a little bit of a note to say thank you to their favorite teacher and just letting them know how important they are. I would make sure that their favorite uncle would come over a bit more often, and I'd be organizing those sorts of functions to make sure that they were there. I would also enhance the relationship with their youth leader or a youth worker that they're connected with if they're going to a youth group. And I would make sure that there was a sort of support that said, I actually really endorse the work that you're doing, and make those people feel valued in their role and know that the value of that relationship. I might also put up other photos, not just of me and them. I'd put other photos of them with their significant other. And I know when kids are going through the HSC, There was a lovely practice, which I do from time to time in our own community. Send a little note to somebody who is doing their HSC and just let them know that they're valued. Now, as a parent, it's actually, and we used to write, paper notes, like old-fashioned notes, not just text messages. Yeah. And so that's something that gets saved and put in a little card or stuck up on the fridge that gets seen. So as a parent, I think it's really helpful to encourage that. Say, did you know they're doing the HSC? Any chance you could write a little note for them? Or send them something, or send them a message, or something that lets them know that you're thinking of them. That's helpful. That's where we build their resilience.
This ties into part of Peter Benson's Finding Sparks, where we encourage adults to be spark champions in our children's lives. And it's not hard to be a spark champion. It's saying to grandma, won't you just notice his new basketball shoes and comment, because he loves basketball so much. And, a teacher or a coach saying, oh, I really noticed how you've been practicing your shooting this week. Suddenly those people are these champions of your child. So that's such a beautiful tie-in. And I think, Lyn, also what I love with the Resilience Doughnut is that we know that every child and every person has some of all 7 factors. But then we tend to have some aspects that there's a little bit more strength in them. Can you explain what that looks like and why we focus on 3 rather than all 7?
Okay, I said earlier about the little boy who was not good at maths but really good at tennis. And he said, well, then you'd get the tennis coach. It's the same concept. So essentially what you're doing is you're looking for the highest strengths. You're looking for where the most potential for those relationships are. And to put another analogy on top of the existing analogy, the analogy of a donut, we're going to think about fishing, okay? So if I was standing in the middle of the donut and I had 7 fish ponds and I had the chance to only dip my fishing rod into the fish ponds 3 times, I'd be looking at every one of those fish ponds to see which ones had the most fish in it. Some of them would have 2 fish, some of them would have 9 fish, some of them have had 5 fish. I'd be looking for the ones that had 9 or 5, but I'd probably not dip my fishing net into the ones with only 2. And this is the same concept, because essentially what we're trying to do is to build the I have, I am, and I can. So you foster what is already working and you do more of what's working. And what we like to think about is what we call donut moments, where we link the 3 factors all together at the one time. And when you can link them all together at the one time, it's like, for me, it's like going surfing with my husband and my son and my community, and I am just flying for at least a week. I feel like I can do anything, and I feel like I'm a good person. And essentially, they were my skill factor, my partner factor, and my family factor. Now, I talk about the partner factor because I'm an adult, I'm not a child, and the adult donut has a partner factor instead of the parent factor. And I have people around me that help me to cope. Now, I might have to deal with something really tough, but I feel like I can cope with it a bit better because I've had that experience where those 3 are connected. But not everybody has a partner, and not everybody has good parents.
Yeah, so then they would dip into a different pond then.
That's right. So
Beautiful.
Thinking fishing, it doesn't mean that the factors have all got 0 or that some are low and they're not doing very well. Well, they've got 2 things going for them rather than 10. So you just go for the ones that have got the most going for them.
Now, if we have schools that are listening, I know that you have the Resilience Doughnut out in schools. How can schools develop resilience? What can schools do well?
We have a number of schools involved. I think we've probably at the moment got 200 schools on our books, but I think we've probably dealt with about 700 so far across the world, which is really exciting.
That's exciting.
But what we found is that every school has its own culture, but we give them the model and show them the model. And one of the things that we work really well with is teaching the teachers how to have the conversations with the young children and the teenagers around their donuts. We also get the teachers, not us, to teach the kids, because the teachers are in their world. We're not going to go in and teach them and go away because we're not in their world. We don't think that we need to come in and do a big spruiking thing about how to be happy. We actually are going in and saying, let's have a look at your donut and let's teach the teachers to teach you about the donut, because those teachers are going to be in your life for a while. And they can say, hey, what's your donut like this week? Then we also can go in and teach the parents about the donut. And then the parents are able to also then see that there's a language of building the resilient strengths. The child might be struggling at school, but let's look at the strengths they've got outside of school that might bolster them so they can cope with school. So essentially it's a model of activating, or a program in schools of activating the resources that the children have in their lives. And one of the aspects that we love about using the Resilience Doughnut in the schools is it's sustainable. So once we've trained teachers or a group of people in the schools, it might be the teachers and the parents, they can then go and train others. So it becomes a very cost-effective program, but really based on the research that we've got that says it's actually much better to have a program that's sustainable using the staff and the people that are going to keep it going, rather than having a master's student come in and do a program and go, or a guest speaker who comes in and goes.
Yes. Finally, something I ask all my guests, what is your hope for this generation of teenagers?
My hope for this generation of teenagers is that they are connected, that they're connected at a very deep level. My hope is that they will be able to rise above the technology that sometimes entraps their brains and become creative in this new era. And my hope is that they'll be so connected with their adults and the others around them that they'll reach out and be beyond themselves.
I remember when I first learned about resilience and how it's not something that you're born with or born without. It's something that can be built throughout our lives. It's also not an all or nothing concept in that your teen doesn't need to have all 7 factors in their life. The beauty of this resilience model is that you can work with your teen to pick the 3 factors that best fit in their life and focus on those. If you want to find out more about Lyn and the Resilience Doughnut, you can find her at theresiliencecentre.com.au. You can also find me or leave a question for a future episode via email or my Facebook page, or via raisingteens.au. Or you can go to the Hope 1032 podcast page. Please subscribe and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'd love to see you next episode, and in the meantime, keep parenting with your teen's future adult in mind.
This episode was hosted by Collett Smart, edited and produced by Alec Green, imaging by Lucy Weil, and social media by Beth Rivers.